How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Holy shit, it's a new episode of a podcast called Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, an undead host, and today, as I just said just seconds ago, it's a new episode of the podcast. I have Kyle Edward Ball on the podcast talking about his new movie, SKINAMARINK, out right now in theaters. Go see it if you haven't already. It's a one-of-a-kind movie. I highly recommend it. This is a great interview with the filmmaker. Lots of fun topics, mostly centered around nightmares. So if you are a fan of nightmares, you've come to the right podcast. If you're a fan of the movie SKINAMARINK, you've come to the right podcast because we talk about the movie. We talk about his YouTube channel. We talk about all types of fun, spooky things. Go see SKINAMARINK out in theaters, coming to a streamer probably in the spring, I think. I'm not completely positive. I don't know. You have Google. You can look it up yourself if you're interested, I guess. It's been a few weeks since we released a new episode, maybe even a month. I can't recall now at this point. Took some time off, and I'm back, hopefully, with at least one new episode every week going forward. I am back, baby. The ghoul has returned. And also, this is new since the last time I put an episode out. Right now, throughout the month of January, I have a Kickstarter going on for my small press, Ghoulish Books. And it's going pretty well. It's a project we love, according to Kickstarter, a staff pick. It's being advertised on the homepage and on the publishing category homepage as well. It is it's going well. My initial goal was 7,000, and we hit that within 9 hours of launching on the 5th of January, I think? Maybe the 3rd of January? The first week of January, it was a Tuesday. We launched, and we hit, I think, like 9,000 within day one. And right now, as I record this intro, we're at 17,537, and we still have 19 days to go until it ends. So that's pretty exciting. We have lots of fun stretch goals still to hit at 20,000. Oh shit, this is also new. We announced a brand new magazine we were doing called Ghoulish Tales, and it's open for submission now. Payment is 7 cents a word, but if we hit 20,000 on the Kickstarter stretch goal, we will increase the payment from 7 cents to 10 cents a word. Pretty exciting. Also, the stretch goal after that, 25,000, we will produce audiobooks of all the books we will putting out in 2023, and we have a lot of fun books. I'm not going to get into those books right now. It's all listed and mapped out on the Kickstarter itself. I will have a link in the show notes if for some reason you can't access the link. Just go to Kickstarter.com, and it might be on the homepage. If not, just type in Ghoulish on the search. The complete title is Year of the Ghoul, 13 Terrifying Tomes from Ghoulish Books, but I'm pretty sure if you just type in Ghoulish, it will pop up in the search. It ends on the 2nd of February, 2023, obviously. I didn't need to say that. And I hope if you're a fan of the podcast, you consider backing it. We have what we're doing is we have everything we're publishing in 2023 available to pre-order as one big spooky book bundle. So we did that kind of last year as well, but through the Ghoulish Books website. Now this time we're doing it via Kickstarter, and it's going pretty well. I'm pumped up, baby. I'm pumped up. I'm full of spooky stuff, and I'm ready to rock and roll. This episode with the filmmaker of SKINAMARINK is a blast. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you will have me a good time. Thank you for sticking with me and waiting a long amount of time between new episodes of the podcast. I hope it's been worth it. I hope you have a great day. Thank you. So I do want to talk about the movie of Phyllis and the YouTube channel that you have, which is amazing, by the way. But
Thank
before
you.
we do that, I would love to know what kind of experience you have had as a filmmaker before the channel even launched, because I don't know a lot about you. So I just want to know, where the hell did you come from?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. I still live there. Ever since I was around 7, even maybe before that, I always knew I wanted to direct movies. Shortly thereafter, I got into horror movies specifically, but also through my teen years watched all the kind of classics. And then I went to film school at NAIT, the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, which is a polytechnic in Canada, for film school through the digital cinema program. Then graduated in my early 20s. Then I went on to sell video equipment for a while, dabbled a little bit in other things. Like I briefly had worked with a local music video director called Mike Maxis, but that didn't really go anywhere for my career. Then around, I think, 2006-ish, 2005, 2006, I figured, okay, maybe I could get into doing horror shorts first to launch something. And this was right around the time that, like, I think it was quite a bit, like maybe a 1 year or two after, but the movie Lights Out.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was obviously based on a short film that went incredibly viral, and afterwards, everyone was doing a horror short, right? Like doing horror shorts was suddenly a huge thing.
Yeah, when did that
Um,
come out?
I think it was 2013, 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, because I swear we watched it in film class one day, and that was around my second year, 2013, 2014. I don't know. So I did a short horror video, shot it with my friends, and I did all the things that you really shouldn't do as a filmmaker. So I didn't make something that I wanted to make or wanted to see. I did something that I thought others would like. And usually when you do something like that, it doesn't read and no one likes it, right? And that turned out to be the case. So I was kind of depressed about that. And so then one day I came up with the idea, and other people have come up with similar ideas. Like, it's not the most unique thing in the world to say, hey, what if we filmed a dream, right?
Right.
But one day I thought, hey, what if like I did a just channel where people commented nightmares they had and I recreate them, right? And why not? Why not give it a try? So I did the first episode called Nightmare One, based on a dream I had, that I remember from when I was 8. And I was really proud of it. And the response was good. And by good, I mean, like, like it didn't go viral, but it got a little bit of attention, which was more than I used to, which is getting no attention. And then people started commenting nightmares they had. And I'm like, perfect, I can recreate these. So I did a few more, about around Nightmare 4, Nightmare 5. I started promoting it a bit more actively. So I posted it to a few subreddits, like I think the Dreams subreddit, maybe the Nightmare subreddit, and it started getting more steam. It started building a following. So I started getting into the 100 subscriber territory, 200, 300, which was awesome. And then while I was shooting these nightmare videos, I was also, and this was never my plan, but this was kind of something that happened by accident. I was kind of relearning after the haze of film school who I was as a filmmaker. So I was learning the things that I was good at. I was learning at the things that I wasn't good at. I was learning um, how to kind of work and do stuff quickly and cheaply while having it still look good. I was learning how to work with people better. I was learning on how to respond to audience better. And I was also kind of through osmosis, because people were commenting nightmares they had, what people subconsciously are kind of creeped out by, because it's not always what you would think, right?
Right.
And yeah. So I did that for 3 or 4 years. Technically, the channel is still active, but it's on a fairly long hiatus because SKINAMARINK has taken over my life. Um, so at about doing 30 or so of these nightmare videos, I decided, okay, I think I've learned enough. Maybe while I'm doing this, I could try to segue into doing an ultra low budget feature. So I thought, okay, before I do a feature, I should do like kind of a proof of concept short film to show what I have in my mind. And then that could be a nice stepping stone between doing these short YouTube videos into doing a modest feature film, right?
Hmm.
So I had always had this idea in my mind about um, a kid in a house. And then I also had realized one of the most common nightmares people would comment is variations on the exact same theme. So I noticed a lot of people commenting this exact nightmare. I'm between the ages of 6 and 10 years old. I'm in my house. My parents are either missing or dead, and there's a monster. And I would say about half of the nightmares people would describe are were variations on that.
Wow.
And the similarities are eerie because everyone seems to have it around the same age, so 6 to 10 years old, and they vividly remember it like into their 20s, 30s, even 40s. And so I thought, oh, there's something to that, right? And it's weird. It's almost like it was so common that I'm almost convinced that it's a universal part of humanity. Like I feel like every human has this dream at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if I've had the dream, but I'm also bad at remembering my dreams, so it's always
Yeah.
possible. What about you? Do you remember little dreams well?
Yeah, I used to remember them fairly well. But I don't anymore. And I find the only time I do vividly remember a dream is if I'm waking up from a nap or my nicotine levels are being challenged in one direction. So, and I've noticed this from other people. If you try to quit smoking, it fucks up your dreams, particularly if you're taking like an aid like Champex.
Yeah.
And if you start smoking again, that'll also affect your dreams. And I've heard this from other people. I haven't smoked in 3 to 4 years, except for a few cigarettes I had at the Fantasia Film Festival.
Was that
But
the
like,
premiere?
yeah, that was the
Yeah,
world premiere. But like, okay, I was in a French-speaking city. I'm not gonna like not smoke. Let's
you
be
have to smoke.
realistic about these things, people. So I so yeah, those are the only times I vividly remember them. I still remember them from time to time, but
Hmm.
I don't remember them as much as I did when I was little.
Since you've spent so much time recreating night yields in the recent yields, has like sleeping now, does it feel like a job to you? Like, oh, I'm gonna go
Oh,
dream, gotta clock in now.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. Although sometimes I'll do stuff like I'll try to actively pull from dreams that I've had,
Hmm.
and then I have to go back and try to remember them. That sometimes feels like, but it's not like an active thing that impedes me. And uh, I I've always been kind of a weird sleeper who sleeps weird hours, and I don't need one more thing in my life to get in the way of sleeping.
What about sleep paralysis? Is that something you've ever had to deal with?
So I've never dealt really with it outside of the kind of shades that are more common. So, oh, I was waking up from a dream into waking up, and I had 10 seconds where it felt like I couldn't move. Like I've
Hmm.
had shades of that, but I've never had a full on experience of night paralysis.
Okay. I do have one question that when I look at it now seems kind of like a generic throwaway question, but I'm curious how you personally would define what a nightmare is. Just as a bad dream? Or do you have something a bit more specific in mind?
No, I would say yeah, basically a bad dream. So there's standard dreams, which are, there might be things that are unsettling or that you don't like that happens in them. Like for example, oh, I had a dream. We were at West Edmonton Mall. I was there with Matthew Perry. He was being a dick. Like that's a dream that I would say like maybe has things that you don't like in it, but I wouldn't count it as a nightmare.
Hmm. It would also
I'll
be fairly expensive for you to shoot.
yeah, right. Well, that was another thing too. People would comment. So another really common dream or nightmare people would comment are these ones that we all have where it's like, okay, so I'm at this place and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens. And it would just be this long thing. And I would have to tell people, okay, even if I could find a way to shoot this without it being expensive, like this is difficult because it's so many things and I don't know how creepy that would be, right? So I
Right.
know I get this was a nightmare for you, but it doesn't really fit the mood of my channel, which is very slow and paced. Um, so yeah, so and I would say a real nightmare is something that not only is upsetting, but something that genuinely scares you in the moment, and you're scared in the moment of the dream.
Right. That makes
Yeah,
sense. I think that makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah. Um, how long did these videos usually take you? And like, will they usually did you have to spend much money producing them, or will you just make them like in your house? I know you had some that were shot outside while driving too, I saw.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so most of them I shot in a day, and then it would take either anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks, usually no more than a week to edit it. There's exceptions, like there's a handful that like I had to do a certain special effect and I really wanted to get it right. But for the most part, turnaround time from shoot to finish was like about a week, and it rarely took more than one day to shoot. I didn't really use any money to film them outside of, before I started the channel, I had invested in a camera, a Sony A6300 mirrorless unit with a handful of lenses. I got a discount on all that because at the time I was working to sell video equipment for a camera store in Canada called VizTech. But outside of that, the only expenses I would have is sometimes like maybe purchasing corn syrup to make fake blood, and
Hmm.
maybe hey, we'll shoot out in the country and then afterwards I'll pay for McDonald's for whoever I was shooting with. But outside of that, really there was no expenses. So I just tried my best to use or an Uber from one location to the other. But outside of that, they were basically done for free. For the most part, I filmed it in my apartment or my house. And when I say my house, I mean the first one, even though I wasn't living there at the time, I shot in my parents' house, which has now been dubbed the SKINAMARINK house because that's where SKINAMARINK was filmed. But
Oh
there's
gosh, just to interrupt you
what?
for a second, it just occurred to
Yeah.
me. I hope no one ever finds out what that address is because I can
Yeah,
see.
I thought about
Yeah,
that. Like I've told because since it's blown up, like people know it's in Edmonton. Thank God there's no exterior shots because
yeah.
like but like I'm hoping no one does any detective work. Like I told my parents ever since it's blown up, like be cautious about like if CBC calls you and says they want to interview you, that's great, but like don't show the house, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Not
it's the only house on that street without windows and doors. So.
yeah, so easy to find. Oh, this is the one. There's no windows or door. This is the only house on the street that's grainy. Um oh, and by the way, the fans have been phenomenal. I haven't had any crazies yet.
It's gonna happen.
That's unnerving. Sorry, just a sec. I heard just a thud outside the door and I'm home alone. There's not, it's a 95% chance it's my cat, but I'm just gonna double check.
Please check.
Yeah. Miles, 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 it's fine.
I am terrified.
Sorry about that. My cats get like abject permanence issues when we close the door. Like
Hmm.
usually we have all the doors in the apartment open so they can roam around.
Yeah.
And today's been particularly stressful because I started my workout before the podcast, then I'm doing this, then I have to continue, then I have other interviews. So
I do have to say, what was the timing of that after what we were
yeah,
just talking about was really disturbing to me.
yeah, it is creepy. Yeah. But I kind of suspected it was just my cats. It was really creepy going into the hallway too, because I have the main light on in this room, and then when you go into the hallway, like all the curtains, so I'm just stepping right into darkness. Anyways, where were we?
I have no idea.
We were talking about
We were just talking about the fan base and how they have treated
oh
the
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So they've all been great and phenomenal. And even before that, like when I didn't have the movie, when I just had my couple hundred YouTube subscribers, they were phenomenal too. And even though I didn't have a lot of them, I always appreciated when I post something, people would say stuff about like I always appreciated it. And now it's been interesting since the the movie, I've like quadrupled my amount of subscribers up to my channel, even though I'm not putting out videos.
Hmm.
And I'm getting all these comments, and it's been insane. And also, I've had a few people commenting or even reaching out to me through email, being like, I was a fan of yours from when you started the channel. And it's been insane seeing how much your movie's blown up, right? Like to some of these people, this was just like, oh, this little channel that I like that no one's heard of, and now like the guy who did that's making a movie, so it's neat for them. And there's a few people where I recreated their nightmares, and they've said, wow, this is insane. Like this guy recreated my nightmare, and now he's like got this big movie. It's so neat, right?
That brings an interesting question. Like for those that you did recreate the nightmares, what was the reaction like from those people specifically when they saw the nightmare reenaction video?
So the people who commented Nightmare and I recreated it.
Yeah, like how did they react to the video then once they told you about the dream they had?
Usually it was I would say actually basically every time it was fairly positive. So Um, a lot of times it was, oh, this was great, thank you so much. Even though maybe, like, let's say they would have never said anything to indicate this, but they were maybe disappointed by it or thought this wasn't quite what my dream was. They would
Yeah,
still say, I think they were still just tickled pink that someone did it, right?
right,
And there were a handful of people who were like, oh, this feels exactly like the dream, like this is so unnerving, right? It's weird because after like a while I realized I can't get into their mind and recreate what they experienced 100%. So the best what I'm going to do is try to recreate the mood, right? I'm going to try to think, okay, how did they feel in this nightmare, and try my best to recreate at least the feeling of it, even though um the dream they had probably wasn't like this, because like they don't remember grain or lo-fi audio or jump cuts, right? But
right.
so I have to do my best to kind of at least try to recreate the mood, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've seen the movie, I've seen Hack, I've seen a lot of the videos on your YouTube channel now, and that's the one thing I think that you will just like so amazing at is tone and mood and creating a super bad vibe. Is that all intuition on your end, or like, can you talk about that a bit?
So a lot of it was through the YouTube channel. I learned that that was my biggest strength, was creating tone and atmosphere and feeling, and also kind of leaning into not just what I felt I was good at, but also what I liked to recreate. And so the more I did it, the more I realized, okay, if you have any weaknesses, because I have tons as a filmmaker, the one thing that you're fairly good at, and it's subjective, right? But the one thing you're good at is tone and atmosphere and feeling. So go 500 miles an hour in that direction and just stick with it, right? Because that's what you're good at, right? So, yeah, if I was to give advice to filmmakers, I'd say find what you're good at and lean into it as much as possible. And that's what I did.
Excellent. That's great advice for anyone interested in creating anything. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I imagine the only way to find that out is by just continuing to make things over and over and just kind of learning from the experience.
Yeah, yeah, because again, like when this whole time doing my YouTube series, it was only after a while that I had built a following, and my channel never really at any point blew up, right? Like the only reason I was doing it was because I liked doing it. It was rewarding. It made me happy, even though I had like 1,000 and change subscribers, and like a good portion of those were either bots or well, I don't know how many were bots, but some of those were probably bots. Some of those were probably accounts who commented once and never watched another video. But I kept at it because I enjoyed it, right? So, and I also did realize at some point that this is an amazing sandbox to play in, right? So keep doing it, right? So don't be discouraged if you start a channel and doesn't immediately go viral, because it can still be incredibly rewarding. And even though my channel never really, and still even to this day has never gone, like it's there's still tons of horror channels which are way bigger than mine, right?
Mhm.
um look at the direction it led me in, right? Like, so yeah.
I think it's difficult to really predict where anything's going to go when you make something online. And I
Yeah,
think like hoping something goes viral is always good, but that shouldn't discourage you if it doesn't happen because most of the time it's
yeah,
not going to happen. You just continue making things because you like it.
yeah. Like it's incredibly hard to get something blow up. I am in the luckiest of luckiest positions that my movie blew up. And I also think there were let's say I had made the exact same movie, but a few things didn't happen. There is a there is an alternate universe where we live in the exact same world. I made the exact same movie, but it didn't blow up. Like I had a lot of happy things happen. Like when my film was submitted to the Fantasia Film Festival, the woman who programmed it, Justine Smith, who is amazing and I owe so much to, she told me that like, okay, I was the third programmer at Fantasia to have this movie drop on my lap. Like first it was channeled to the Canadian film section of the film festival, and she said the person who watched it liked it but didn't know if it was right for that particular section of the festival. Then she said it got bounced to another section of the festival, and same situation, they maybe liked it, maybe didn't, but didn't think it was right. And then finally, through back and forth, ended up on Justine's desk, and she was programming the underground section of the festival, and she instantly fell in love with it, right? And so from that, it was programmed into one of the largest film festivals in the world with all this clout and reach. But there's a universe where maybe it wouldn't have ended up on her desk and I wouldn't have gotten to Fantasia, right? And then Fantasia led to getting the Shudder deal, right? And there's an alternate universe where same movie, same movie going audience, but those things don't align, and maybe the movie never would have blown up, or maybe it would have become lost media. The movie would have like never reached an audience until 20 years from now, right? So even this movie I have that blew up, a lot of things I had to have a lot of luck and a lot of people who believed in the movie make that happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned lost, it could be like a lost media. The movie looks like it's a lost film.
Yeah.
It looks like someone found it in some like grandma's attic from like the 1970s. It has a big
Yeah.
1970s Hulu movie tone to it to me. And I
Hmm.
imagine you will probably a big fan of that decade in film.
Oh, absolutely. Like
It comes
the eight,
across.
yeah, yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, the 80s was a total renaissance for horror movies, right? Like a lot of people look at that period. That was a big horror renaissance.
Hmm.
And there's tons of movies, horror movies from that era that I love, but I still gravitate towards not just the horror movies from the 70s, but movies in general. The feeling of 70s movies, I feel can't be matched.
Same.
And the
Yeah.
tone, right? The tone, right? And I'm gonna say I count The Shining as a movie from the 70s because it was made in 1979, I think, right?
Hmm.
um, Even though it was technically released in the 80s. So
It feels like a 70s movie. Like when I think
it
of
does.
when I think of 70s movies, the big rule that comes across in my brain is patience. So many of those
Yeah.
movies, they have such patience and confidence and slowly unrolling.
And not just that, like other things. Like if you watch a lot of movies from the 70s, not just horror movies, but other ones, like the other day I saw The Wiz for the first time. Have you ever seen The Wiz?
I have not.
So it's a 70s all black cast reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. And so it's got Diana Ross as Dorothy, Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow, Richard Pryor plays the wizard. It's awesome, right?
I had no idea about this cast. That's
No,
insane.
it's incredible. And like they recreate, so the story, instead of Oz, it's so in this version, Dorothy is a school teacher who hasn't flew the nest, so to speak. She still lives at home, and she's in her maybe late 20s, early 30s, and she lives in a urban setting. I think it's New York. And that's the crux of the story. And then, of course, Toto runs away from home. She runs after Toto, and then she's transported to Oz. And what's neat about The Wiz is that it's such an incredibly 70s movie. And so when she goes to Oz, there's all this hope and beauty, but also because it's the 70s, it also shows a lot of urban decay, a lot of rundown buildings, a lot of so it's the beauty of movies in the 70s is its cynicism and hope in tandem, right? So all through the Wiz, you see all this hope and happiness, but you also see all these sad things about America because that was the 70s to a T. A lot of optimism, but also a lot of cynicism, right? And a lot of that has to do with Watergate and the end of the Vietnam War, right? Like I think people wanted to be optimistic and hopeful, but when everything in the world seems like it's falling down, it's hard to be optimistic, right?
That's a
And you
great
see
way to
that,
describe it. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, you see that in other movies too. Like you see that in even there's shades of that in The Exorcist, or even other movies like Willard
Hmm.
or Ben. The 70s, that's the 70s, right? Cynicism and hope at the same time.
And that's what you hope to do in the movies you make as well.
I
Maybe.
I don't I don't know. Like look aesthetically, tone, feeling. Yes, I gravitate to the 70s. I'm just kind of gushing over movies from the 70s right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if Skinamarink is about hope and
No,
cynicism.
it's not. As soon as I said it, I thought, wait, that doesn't check out.
I would say there's definitely sentiment,
Yeah.
right? But yeah.
um, Something I wanted to mention before we run out of time that I've noticed from all the movies I've seen that you've made is the use of TV screens.
Mhm.
A lot of your films, they tend to feature glowing television screens, if not like animation from Skinamarink and so
Mhm.
forth. Do you think do you have any thoughts about that specifically? Because when I see all these TV screens and these night mill videos and also the movie, to me
Mhm.
that kind of symbolizes well, most people fall asleep watching TV, so obviously that would
Yeah.
be incorporated. But also it makes feel some really cool lighting as well.
Mhm. Yeah, the TV thing, that was kind of a happy accident. Like, yeah, so I've always liked the look of a room that's just lit by a TV because it's so familiar in my life, right? Like a lot of times at night, that's the only light in my apartment is the television. So it's familiar, but it also can be very unnerving. There's also so much use to it, right? So you can have a little movie within the movie that can be anything from conveying tone. So, for example, in Skinamarink, we have the cartoons playing in the background to um, add a different mood or tone to certain scenes, but also it can be a motif or useful to just getting across some facts in it, right? So the kids are watching cartoons to comfort themselves, right? So that's a hard fact that you're using the TV for. You can also do fun tricks with it, right? So in Skinamarink, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's parts where the cartoons on the television change in a bizarre way, and that also has a use. Or you could even um, do other stuff like convey hints, right? So there's a few parts where there's cartoons played on the TV, and it's kind of, I don't want to say foreshadowing, but it hints at things, right? So having a movie within a movie in the context of playing on a television, a computer screen, even a mobile phone, can be such a useful motif and mood piece for a movie. And the thing is, that all kind of happened by accident, right? And I'm by no means the first person to discover it, right? You've seen
Hmm.
shades of this either in
Freaking
I think,
Poltergeist has it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Polter, and even before that, there's movies from the 50s where there was something odd playing on the radio, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, another thing is the reason for the cartoons is because when I was doing my nightmare channel, A lot of times TVs or cartoons or this or that would come up in the nightmare, I'm not the only one to discover this either. Like there's a bevy of public domain radio plays from the 30s and 40s or old cartoons from the 30s and 40s that you can use in your videos, and they're all public domain. There's no copyright issues, right? You are limited by that because um for example, realism, right? Like how often are people rewatching old cartoons in this day and age, right? But it just seemed to jive with my lo-fi feel. So that was another thing too. In my nightmare series, on top of using old cartoons, I would use these old radio plays from the 60s or 70s, which were great things for um, using audio for that. Sometimes I'd even use the music from them just as kind of an ad hoc background score, or I'd even use dialogue from some of these radio plays to um, use as almost ADR, additional dialogue in my nightmare videos. So I think it's a great resource. Archive.org, public domain videos and audios, great resource as a filmmaker.
Absolutely. I've definitely have used some of them myself on things, and it's
Mhm.
just such a vast library of things to choose from. It's amazing.
Yeah, and there's overlap. Like there's this one super public domain, and I say super because a lot of these cartoons, they're not public domain because of their age. They're public domain because a lot of them were sold to a company in the 1970s called NTA. And then that company went bankrupt, and all these cartoons just fell into the public domain.
Oh
And
wow.
it makes sense to, well, yeah, it's interesting. And it makes sense too, because in the 60s and 70s, Paramount's going to look at all these cartoons and say, like, these are useless. Like, we're not making money off this. Let's sell them. Let's offload this. Who cares? Right.
But
And
then in
then,
the back room, there was one guy who was
yeah,
like, "Wait, what if in
wait,
50 years there's something called the internet, and we could use it that
yeah,
way?" But that guy was
right,
kicked
right.
out of the building.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then they sold it to a company called NTA, and NTA went kaput, and they just happy accident. But there's this one video I use in Skinamarink, this one old cartoon called Bimbo's Initiation,
Mhm.
and it's actually a spinoff of Betty Boop. Bimbo
Yeah.
appeared in some Betty Boop videos, and that's another weird thing too. I think some Betty Boop cartoons are copyrighted and some aren't. It's weird. But in Bimbo's Initiation, it's this cartoon character that goes around this club, and there's all these trap doors. It's so spooky and weird. And I had put it in my video, and then a few months after I finished the movie, I rewatched the Twilight Zone movie for the first time. And I saw in the Twilight Zone movie, in Joe Dante's segment, the It's a Good Life segment about the little boy who's got magic powers, the Bimbo's Initiation cartoon is used heavily.
Oh wow.
Like, and on top of that, there's one particular shot where Bimbo opens a door, and there's another door, and then opens it and there's another door, and then opens it and there's another door. That exact segment of it is also in the Twilight Zone movie. And so I thought, like, oh, that's kind of neat, that because I'm sure it was the same thing when he made the movie. They're like, there's all these old cartoons, you want to use them, right?
Mhm.
We won't have to pay this company or that company. It's like, oh, these are so neat and creepy, yeah, I'll use these. And he found that exact thing and used it in his too.
It's funny. I recognized Bimbo immediately, mostly
Yeah.
because a friend of mine whose name is Betty, she has a Bimbo tat. She has a Bimbo
Oh, that's
tattoo.
so neat.
So I saw
Yeah.
that and I thought, oh hey, it's Betty's tattoo.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
Shout out to Betty Rocksteady.
Hey.
Yeah.
And her friend Bimbo.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I know we're running close, but we have some mill time. I would
Yeah,
love
we
to
got some
talk
time.
a little bit more about Skinamarink. For one thing, what exactly is the title? Is it a kid's song, I think?
Yeah, yeah. So it's originally It's like a traditional. So the first time I think it was ever written down was like the early 1900s. It was the first record of it is someone had used it in, I think, a musical, but there's indications that he was actually taking that from a traditional folk song that had been passed around through America and maybe even going back to the United Kingdom before that. But the first time I think it ever appears in print is sheet music for a musical in the early 1900s. And so it had always been passed around as kind of a kid's fun nonsense song. And then in the 1970s or 80s, there's a very popular children's entertainment group called Sharon, Lois, and Bram in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
who used that song to great effect. And it was kind of like their mainstay, right? Like that was their big thing. They had a kids show called The Elephant Show, which I think was even rebroadcast on Nickelodeon in the United States, although I could be wrong about that. And that was the theme for the show, right? And even them, I actually researched it, even they don't 100% know where the song, like its total lineage, because its lineage is fairly vague because it's a traditional like kind of folk song, right? So no one really knows where it originally came from, and there's even variations on it, right? So originally in the United States it was SKINAMARINK,
Mm-hmm.
and then Sharon, Lois, and Bram, they changed it to SKINAMARINK, which makes more sense because a children's song Skina is easier to pronounce than Skida.
Yeah.
Or maybe
It's
that's just a Canadian variation of it. Who knows?
it's fun to say too.
Yeah, yeah. And then the reason I named the movie that was originally it was just a working title. So I was watching an old um the movie with Elizabeth Taylor, it's Tennessee Williams. I think it's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, but I could be wrong about that. It could be The Glass Menagerie. I don't know. Old movie from the 50s. Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor. Paul Newman's an alcoholic, yada yada. So in it, there's a scene where there's a kid's birthday party, and I heard the kids singing Skinamarink.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Because as a kid growing up in Canada in the 90s, I assumed it was Sharon, Lois, and Bram who came up with that, right? So I
Yeah.
researched it, and it's like, okay, clearly they did not hear Sharon, Lois, and Bram sing this, right, in the 50s. So I researched it and found the history of it. And then at some point I realized, oh, Skinamarink, that's not trademarked, right? You can't trademark in Canada, at least you can't trademark a single word, especially if it's like um ancient like this, right?
Yeah.
And uh you can, I think, trademark it as far as like I think at some point Sharon Lois and Bram had a company called Skinamarink Video. Don't quote me on that. You can trademark it in that sense, but that word is up for grabs. I'm gonna take it, right? So, and with that being said, the word Skinamarink in Canada, I don't have hold a copyright to that either. I just
Great.
have a copyright to the movie that was made in 2002 entitled Skinamarink. But so I'm like, okay, this actually checks a few boxes for me. It's sentimental to me, it's sentimental to others, it feels personal, it has a hard k sound in it, skinamarink, right? And that those words that have k sounds in them have supposedly are more easy to retain, which is why apparently Coca-Cola and Kodak were the two most recognizable brands for a
What?
certain period. Supposedly, this is one of those things that I think is an advertising myth. I don't know if that's
Okay.
actually true, but this is something that people were told for a very long time. I think in the 70s and 80s, people were told two biggest brands in the world right now, Kodak and Coca-Cola. Obviously, that's changed now, but even now, you could say Facebook, TikTok,
Yeah.
right? Like who knows, right?
What the hell?
So yeah, supposedly there's magic to the k sound. So I thought all those things, and on top of that, it vaguely ties into the theme of movie, which is the movie involves children and it doesn't make sense. And
Hmm.
Skinamarink is a kid song that's a nonsense word. And I'm like, okay, working title, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, eventually I'll come up with a good title. That'll just be the working title. And here we are today.
I think it's a perfect title. It's really ominous and strange and mysterious when you look at it. Plus, it has the word skin in it, and that's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
disturbing.
yeah. Skin Amarink. Yeah, so yeah.
So I imagine with the movie blowing up recently, how it has, you probably have had many meetings, I would assume, about the movie, about getting it out. How often have you had to explain what the title means? And are you sick of it by now?
Uh Bizarrely, very few. My distributor never questioned it. My
Okay.
producers never questioned it. It's weird. Like when I was signing the stuff with my original distributor, Mutiny Pictures, which now is owned by Bayview Entertainment. The my main contact who worked there at the time, Jonathan Barkin, who has been great. Jonathan Barkin,
Hmm.
amazing person. um we were going over like dotting the i's, crossing the t's before I signed and he signed. And I said, okay, so Jonathan, how do you feel about the title? And he's like, it's great. It's like, that's it, right? And he's like, we've never, because there was a thing in the contract about changing the title for foreign markets. And he's
Hmm.
like, that's the only, um, he's like, that's the only time I would foresee the title of the movie being changed is when we're selling it to foreign markets. I think in this English speaking market, it's great. Don't worry about it. And outside of that, people rarely ask about it. Occasionally, Canadians or kids in the States who saw Sharon Lois and Bram will make a joke about it and bring it up and say like, oh, so this isn't a show Sharon Lois and Bram joint. And I'm like, no, it's not. But interestingly enough, I've been kind of waiting for, because one of them passed away, but one of the members, I think Sharon or what, like, forgive me if I'm misquoting, but one of them is still doing music and singing that song, and I'm kind of waiting for one day for one of them to find out about the movie and reach out to me. I hope it's positive. I hope they're not like, hey, like I like, we don't like this. And I hope they would have good enough humor to see the name of this word and as a horror movie, because at the end of the day, I did kind of name it after the song I heard as a kid, right? And
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah.
maybe you guys could collaborate on a music video.
Oh.
It's Skinamarink
Yeah.
music video.
I
Imagine
don't know
that.
if the tone of my work works for children.
I disagree.
I think if anything, there's gonna be hopefully a hey, my name's Kyle. I made this horror movie. I grew up with your music. Hey Kyle, nice to meet you. It's nice to know that you liked our music as a child. Maybe a picture opportunity, and I think that's the only overlap that we could possibly have. I don't think children's entertainment is my venue. I don't think bizarre experimental horror movies are their venue, but yeah,
You never know. You never know.
you never know, right? Mhm.
Going back to Skinamarink and like how you filmed it and whatnot, and how you have filmed a lot of the things you have available,
Mhm.
there's not a lot of traditional stuff going on. There's not a lot of just like faces, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this more of a budget thing, or is it's just like a style thing that you hope to continue doing? Will we focus less on, faces and people talking and more on just like strange rooms and vibes?
Yeah, yeah. So the answer is kind of all of the above, right? So when I was doing the Nightmare series, I had developed this style of not showing people because I didn't have actors readily available, right? And originally it was just a necessity thing, but over time I realized, there's a certain magic about this style that I really like and want to lean into? What if I even pushed it further? What if I did entire videos where you never see a human being or you only see hints of it? And then that led into, hey, what if I did an entire feature like this, right? So we film basically a short film's worth of footage of the people. We never really see them. They're only kind of hinted at. That might be a challenge for the viewer to get through, but it could also be really creepy and unnerving and powerful, right? So that the answer is all of the above. It was kind of a happy accident that both was budget conscious,
Mhm.
but also stylistically rewarding and worked for this particular movie, right? So
This I love the use of subtitles in the movie as well.
yeah, and that was a little bit of influence on the analog horror phenomenon, right? So I would say a lot of this analog horror stuff on YouTube and the internet leaned into that, but there was also other things too. So a lot of things in movies, it's not just one reason why you did it. There was a whole confluence, right? So
Right.
another thing was I wanted to have scenes where we could hear people talking, but we didn't necessarily, and I wanted scenes where, let me back up. I wanted scenes where we could hear people, but they were still so quiet that we couldn't hear them comprehensively, but we still understood what they were saying. And I know that's a weird figure eight there, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it. I
Yeah.
wanted scenes where we didn't quite hear people, but we still understood what they were saying,
I think that
right?
makes sense because a lot of dreams are like that too. You don't
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
know what is happening or what is being said, but you know something is being said.
Yeah, or we understand or like I've had dreams where people, I understood what they were saying even though their lips weren't moving, right? I wanted
Mhm.
it to kind of feel like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. And going forward, do you have anything else planned? Like, what's the future looking like for you?
Yeah, so I originally had two ideas for movies. One was something where three strangers met in a dream, and the other was a take on the Pied Piper story. And over the past couple months, the more people have asked me about that the magic to those ideas have kind of gone away for me. So and this was something I've had since I was a little kid. Like I would write little short horror stories when I was
Hmm.
like 8 or 9, and my mom would read them and she'd be like, "Oh, this is great. You should keep writing it." But then it would lose its magic because I don't know. I don't know why. I've
Yeah.
just always been like that. So I have a third idea for a movie
Don't talk about it.
that yeah, I've had for a while, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep it really close to my chest until it's at least kind of more concrete and maybe the script is finished, right? So
Absolutely. That's a really common thing, I think, with creatives is
yeah,
when you talk about it, you lose some of the magic because I think there's an excitement with bottling something up, knowing eventually you can release it. But if you do it too early, then it's like, well, fuck it.
yeah, like there's something magical to this is my thing and I'm gonna build it in my mind. And there's other things like too, right? Like you'll start reading into people's reactions when you tell the idea, right? Like sometimes you'll
Mhm.
tell people an idea and they'll be like, "Oh, that's so neat," right? And then you'll lean more into that, even though that might not be the best idea. Maybe it's just the best elevator pitch of the idea, right? Or
Right.
sometimes you'll tell someone something and they'll be like, "Well, that's kind of like this, isn't it?" And then you'll be like, "Oh, I guess it is kind of like that," even though in your mind maybe it isn't
Mhm.
necessarily that much like that other movie, other story, right? But then that'll influence it too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay. That makes total sense to me. And I think not talking about this new idea is the best way to go. Well,
yeah,
thank you for coming on and doing this, man. I love the movie. I'm excited for people to watch it. How can folks go out and see it?
yeah, for sure. So we will be playing at theaters across Canada, America, and that includes like a significant a portion of America. Like I found out the other day that we'll actually have a screening in Guam. So that's cool. We're gonna
Wow.
so yeah, it's insane. Like we're gonna have screenings all over Texas, all over the United States. I'm surprised at how many screens we're getting in Texas alone. This is insane. Like we have
Well,
multiple screenings
oh
in
yeah.
Corpus Christi. Yeah,
I'm in
yeah,
I'm in San
yeah.
Antonio, so
We're definitely having a few screenings in the San Antonio area.
hell yeah, I will be going out.
Yeah,
I'm really interested in seeing what it's like on a big screen in a theater because I was at a screening by Bayview, and the experience
yeah.
of watching it like in a like at midnight in a dark room with no lights on, with my face inches from the screen, I think that really helped with the whole vibe. So I can't wait to see what it's like in a theater too. That's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah. Like
interesting.
I've heard multiple things because I've gotten messages from a few people who were lucky enough, like you, to get a screener from the distributor, and they've said, "Oh, watching it at home on my TV or laptop with the headphones on was terrifying." But I've seen other people who saw the theatrical experience who were also like, this was insane seeing on a big screen. It felt like I've never seen something like, imagine watching an analog horror video on a big screen, right? Like, so
Yeah,
I will say
I'm excited.
the
I want to see it on a big screen.
yeah, yeah. Like I will say the only theatrical screening I've actually attended was the world premiere at Fantasia, and it was insane seeing it on a big well, although really the whole time I was watching the audience, right? But
Hmm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna be playing at theaters across the United States and Canada. And right now we do, I think, just have one screen for the United Kingdom, but hopefully that will grow. But we will be playing the Prince Charles Theatre in London. Then we have one screen in Australia in Brisbane, and nothing for New Zealand yet, but fingers crossed we get a screen in New Zealand. My hope was that so the Shudder territory is Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand.
Hmm.
And my hope was if we could get at least one screen in that whole territory, it would be great, right? So yeah, so far we're at 200 and change screens right now, and that might grow a lot. That might not. That might grow just a little bit, but a few months ago, I would have been happy if we got 5 screens, if that, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we're now in the hundreds of screens, even though most of those screenings are just one or two showings, it's still incredible. I feel like the luckiest filmmaker on the planet. So January 13th in theaters across North America and UK and Australia, and then coming to Shudder. I don't know the exact date because the date is still up in the air, but probably playing on Shudder at some point. Let's just say the spring of 2023. And by the way, January 13th, Friday the 13th.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was apparently that was a happy accident.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to recommend a way for folks to connect with you online at all? Any social
Yeah,
media
yeah.
platforms?
So if you do want so first of all, if you do want to contact me, I am being bombarded with contact right now. So if you want to just say something as a fan, great. Maybe just tweet it. And if you do need to contact me directly, you can send me a direct message to my Twitter. I may take a while to respond because again, I've been very, very, very busy as of late.
Yeah.
But I promise I will, if I can respond to you, I will try to respond as soon as I can. But
And
just realize I am still just a person, and I can get overwhelmed with contact sometime. Even if it's all positive, I can still get overwhelmed. So you may not get a response. And if you do get a response, it may be in a while. So,
and for those who do want to follow you and keep up, what is your social media handle? What name should they look up?
yeah. So on Twitter, I'm just Kyle Edward Ball. And my YouTube channel is Bite Sized Nightmares.
And That was Kyle Edwardball talking about SKINAMARINK and Night Mills and all types of cool, spooky shit. Go see SKINAMARINK in theaters right now. And go on over to Kickstarter and type in Ghoulish and back us. The campaign ends on the 2nd of February, and you know, I would love to hit some of these stretch goals before we come to an end. So yeah, if you like spooky books, consider backing Ghoulish books on Kickstarter. Thank you so much. See you next week. The ghoul is leaving for now, but I will return. Potentially, maybe. I forget how to end episodes. Ah!
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.